You're one of the survivors from the rescue team, right? I just ran into your teammate, Carlos.
How did a girl like you manage to survive?
Hey, I'm no ordinary civvy. I'm a member of STARS.
She's fucking cool. There, that's the video, that's why she's awesome. Okay, I guess a little something more. In a series that has had a playable female character in every main series game for 9 years, Jill has managed to be one of the bigger standouts of the series, despite not driving the plot. In a group of characters who are all supposed to be believably competent, she fits the role the game asks for better than the others, and she may be one of the best examples of how to present a subdued personality in a game that has both action and puzzle elements. While her importance to the industry is often overlooked and her games devalued by some, the experience of controlling Jill is a learning experience of getting accustomed to a new haunting environment and getting to know everything about where you are so you can survive. Resident Evil's Master of Unlocking is a fan favorite for the series because of the game she's in and how she's the most fitting character to play as you improve. Now, I may not know all the characters that were brought to gaming when it was first entering 3D, but Jill seems to be the first playable 3D female character in a big franchise, and perhaps only the second female playable character in 3D. Yeah, technically Jill is not 100% 3D in Resident Evil 1 like Laura Harris is in D, but all the time spent playing as her is done with her 3D model. I don't know if it's getting overshadowed by Lara Croft in this generation, but that's pretty significant to never be brought up. She may be second place to Laura Harris, but even she's unknown. It's amazing that while Jill is a common favorite, her significance in the history of video games is never brought up. The Resident Evil games had the same central mechanics until 2005, so this core can be analyzed for the sake of understanding what the player is given to flesh out the characters of the series. The playstyle that results in most skillfully completing the game tends to feel like the most genuine representation of who the character is. After all, could a sloppy, short-sighted, undisciplined person survive these dangerous walls? You have limited supplies at the start, ammo and health are scattered around, wasting bullets is all too easy, and having enough empty inventory for new items lessens your options to deal with future surprises from enemies. You have to think about whether or not you should pick up an item, whether or not an enemy is worth the bullets in your gun, whether running past an enemy is too big of a risk, how many items you should have on you, or if it's worth healing now or later. I'd say this is task managing, but it's really threat assessment. The wrong choice here can result in complications, such as not being able to finish off an enemy, therefore wasting all the bullets in your gun, not being prepared for a particularly tough enemy, meaning you can be in really severe danger, needing to back through dangerous areas to get more space in your inventory, and potentially dying. Being put in a rough situation while dealing with Resident Evil's controls and cameras is an easy place to panic, and a good player has to maintain their cool even here. All this danger is a result of the need to explore the environment, and while not exactly an option by choice, exploration is the means by which survival is most likely. You always start out in a dangerous situation and then eventually find one place of refuge, but you're only safe for the short term and you need to get out of there. Jill/the player has to deduce the best means to survive now while maintaining many resources to survive later. Some may argue that leaving the safe areas is stupid. I'd like to think that it's a good, hopeful survival instinct to look for rescue wherever it may be. Given that these games usually start with our character being surprised by enemies, it makes sense to me that they'd avoid waiting around to get surprised again, and explore as much of the area as possible to get some context on what exactly has been happening. While not without its problems, the item management system actively encourages Jill to play as smart and long-term as possible. This may mean Jill has to travel extra to go through a safe route or pull out the stronger weapons to deal with the bigger threats in the shorter route. Jill has to assess if the danger of getting to a needed health item is worth the benefit. Does Jill want to save her best weapons for the most dangerous enemies, or should they be used to stop regular foes from accumulating damage? Obviously this will vary person to person, but a good player can find the right balance of avoiding the danger of enemies, getting the most out of your health items, and getting the most out of your weapons. It's a careful rationality that informs Jill as cautious but intelligent, as she needs to persevere while being prepared for anything, much like a survivor looking for rescue. Jill also appears to be an incredibly observant individual, as she needs to be able to notice the finer details in puzzles and examine the items she picks up to learn more about what they are and what they may be important for. This attentiveness would also explain the document reading she'd do. She's trying to get a grasp on the situation she's in and learn exactly what's going on. Also, let's not underestimate the nerves of steel she's displaying by not freaking out in the face of flesh-eating monsters. Cool under pressure. Resident Evil's gameplay is designed for a calm character who has exploration instinct in a horror environment, and it's hard not to imagine Jill not working to survive the horror in the best physical condition. Now, that's all well and good, but those aren't Jill-exclusive observations, so let's get more specific. Distinguishing Jill from the other playable characters highlights a few differences: her crafty use of tools, her added speed in her solo game, her decision-making in tense and dangerous situations, and the trend of her having skills outside of the usual soldier mold. Jill always has a few tools that either streamline play or open up new options. She's always seen with her lockpick, and as she's the master of unlocking, you don't have to worry about handling the small keys, saving you some inventory space for anything else and giving you access to new places sooner. She also turns Remake into a fun romp through a fancy mansion with the grenade launcher glitch. Obviously not intentional, but still amazing. Resident Evil 3 being her solo game, this is probably the most noticeable her minor differences have ever been. She is also probably the fastest character in any Resident Evil game, as she zooms by in Resident Evil 3, and she's even quick enough and has strong enough reflexes to dodge zombies in close quarters, something no one else does. Decision points throughout RE3 also focus in on Jill's choices and actions when she's confronted with a dangerous situation, more so than usual. She has to think quickly about what's available to her in these situations and figure out the best choice, with some of her decisions in these moments displaying some amazing quick thinking. This reflects the position of the players during the Nemesis sections, where your two choices are always run or fight, with fighting Nemesis usually giving you a beneficial but not technically necessary item. Nemesis sections are possibly the tensest and most thrilling in all Resident Evil. If Jill is intended to go through these without taking damage, she'd need that speed to get out of the way of these surprise punches and rockets and the reflexes to react to their early animations. With nothing else like this in the game, this is a tough challenge. All these little traits that are tied to Jill mold her into what might be the ideal Resident Evil protagonist. Her character feels like a jack-of-all-trades who's knowledgeable enough to be prepared for a hairy situation. She's got more inventory space than Chris, so you have more freedom to take weapons and items with you when you're exploring or just backtracking. Her skills in chemistry and music give her quicker options to overcome roadblocks compared to her comrades. And while these may seem like they'd make a minor difference, when you don't necessarily know what you're going to go up against next, more options lead to a stronger sense of getting control. Jill's specific mechanics may not vary heavily from the standard Resident Evil core, but it may show why she's the one who it's most appropriate for. She's got enough extra skills to make it easier to explore, and these skills seem like the sort of thing that can work better towards dealing with threats. Cutscene Jill is harder to take seriously due to FMV and horrific voice acting, but there are minor things worth bringing up. Jill always has little moments of concern for her comrades.
Don't think about that now. Just rest.
But how about you, Barry?
Brad, hang in there.
It may mean more in a scary situation. Her comrades always treat her as serious as the situation would entail, which is preferable to any condescending attitude that her older comrades would typically be given.
That gunfire. I'm counting on you to investigate, Jill.
Got cold feet already? That's not like you.
Her reactions to new information outside of the documents always feel genuine, and there's an impression of evaluating what to do next. She still always puts her foot down and eventually gets back to finding a way out. Also, Jill sometimes gets really sassy posture when she feels like she's getting talked down to. It amuses me. These touches do well to make Jill feel personable but driven. Of all the things that make Jill stand out, I think the most obvious one is her visual appeal. I'm not just talking about her slender figure. I think Jill may be one of the most consistently well-designed characters for a player to control. In Resident Evil 1, her bright blue attire stands out in the mostly brown and green Spencer Mansion, and this only becomes more pronounced in the caves and labs. While the distant camera angles and tank controls may create a sense of separation from Jill and the player, I think the way Jill contrasts with the environment make her feel important and reactive to player input. She almost always visually stands out in the frame, and her different movement can make her feel right to play, something very important in a game that takes a while to get used to. Her color scheme is bright, but not cartoonish. Her outfits and animations have authority, but give moments of humanity. I actually saw a lot of similarity between this design and Cammy White, although obviously nowhere near as flashy. Even the muted remake design still works to help her stand out. It's an outfit that serves her pseudo-military/police background, but still manages to be stylish and cool. In Nemesis, she got gear that doesn't exactly scream survivalist, but for a player-controlled character, popping out and capturing the eye is important, and with a bigger emphasis on action, this design fits the newer direction. Having a more regular person look does help contrast her with the people she meets in the game and the giant military monster hunting her down, despite a really stupid in-universe reason for this look. Even in Resident Evil 5, she gets 2 cool looks in the DLC. She pops out, feels right, and her attack animations are very satisfying. Jill consistently has that right level of grounded visual appeal that allows a character to be vulnerable and struggle while being just flashy enough to make them cool and memorable. Despite her historical importance often being overlooked, Jill is commonly viewed as one of the most badass and cool characters in video games. Given how nuanced the action feels in these games, the weight of all the decisions seems to be important for others. This only furthers my theory that horror games are where it's easiest to get attached to characters because of the wide range of emotions you feel during the experience, and that your player character is there with you the whole time. A horror game that does its job well enough can engross you into the experience to push you into doing things you may not want to do, and the 2 things that will always be with you in these games are the setting and the player character. If the experience is a memorable and rewarding one to overcome, then your avatar and the place you are traversing will stick with you more. As an elementary school kid, I borrowed my cousin Jonathan's copy of Resident Evil 1 on the PS1, ignored the M for Mature rating, and tried playing the game. I couldn't figure out how to kill the first zombie as Chris since he only had the knife and I had trouble with the controls, but I figured it out as Jill, only to realize I did need to kill that zombie. The entire experience of playing the game for the first time was this weirdly driving tension where even if every room only made me more tense, even if the big moments kept making me jump out of my seat, and even if the idea of being in the same room as the dogs or the crows terrified me, I had to figure out what to do next. It was this wonderful experience of being incredibly driven to explore and discover, despite all these feelings of negativity welling up inside myself. That experience was one I'll never forget, and Jill was my avatar in this world, where you're creeped out by everything around you, but you're driven to keep looking. Besides not really liking Chris during that first playthrough, a lot of stuff just stuck out to me about Jill. She just seems so capable and unafraid, which is weirdly wonderful when you're on edge playing the game. Even later, when I borrowed Remake from my cousin Emily and played through it with less tension, the impression of Jill being capable without feeling vacant or pandering was there. While it probably seems weird to a newcomer, and even myself when I made a video about Eternal Darkness, for me, when I was younger, it kind of wowed me. When you're both engaged and challenged in a scary situation, your player character sort of becomes a representation of how well you could potentially do in a situation like that, and Jill was that for me. I understand that a lot of what I've said will depend on how you feel about the old Resident Evil games. The camera and controls can be difficult to become accustomed to, and the very idea that they're integral to the experience has the reasonable rebuttal that the fundamental experience of the game is flawed if it needs to rely on that. It's very easy to point to the cheap faults in the games, but that never got in the way of the experience for me, because even if I wasn't creeped out, I still played the old Resident Evil games like old adventure games with a strong sense of atmosphere. The games haven't been frightening for me in a long time, but there's a quiet tension and encouraged thoughtfulness that I enjoy. Jill contrasts against the mood to make her more enjoyable to play, but her characteristics still match the encouraged action, so there's no action to character disconnect. While not a personality or story-heavy character, she does feel like someone who channels the very hopeful human idea of survival in a horrific situation. People like Jill because she's smart, cool, level-headed, and human. She feels like someone who would be the perfect friend in the apocalypse, zombie or otherwise. Imposing enough to intimidate others, caring enough to give comfort, and resourceful enough to get what's needed. Thanks for watching. If you're new to Great Game Gals and want to catch up, the playlist is here. If you're a fan of Resident Evil and want to see me play through the Resident Evil Remake as Chris to see how the experience plays out, click here. And always remember to thumbs up, sub, and all that other good stuff. Thanks for watching, and watch out for zombie bees. Okay, now, I mentioned a very stupid in-universe reason for Jill's outfit in Resident Evil 3. It's supposed to be for ease of movement. Now, this would explain why she's faster, but the outfit itself doesn't really make sense to that. I don't exactly see this catching up as sports equipment. Personally, I prefer my headcanon where this is a party outfit. Jill, having so many frustrations about no one believing her story about what happened at the Spencer mansion, decides to take it all out on the dance floor, carrying guns for self-protection, natch, and when she was there, the apocalypse hit. Yep, my version is definitely better.